Okay, folks, this is going to be take two of our spring plant sale preview. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. Apparently, Zoom did an update, and that update erased all of our settings that we had where we had everything going pretty smooth. So the joys of technology, hence the reason I'm a gardener. Um, but yeah, like gardeners all around, we adapt, we figure things out, maybe a little duct tape, some dirt, and we'll get things rolling again. I will do the best I can. Unfortunately, it won't be quite as witty as I was earlier. I get less witty as the day goes on, as my wife will attest. But we'll do the best we can. And if you have questions, just email me, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Obviously, we won't have the back and forth of chat, but you will have this recording to be able to go back and forth on. So with that being said, let's see if we can pull this thing off and give you some type of working there we go. Okay, I think let's make this work. So as I was saying at the first one, I wish everyone was there for me, but I know that, we had over 100 people signed up for this talk, both in person and on Zoom. But I know everyone was there for the plants, and I won't be too upset. A few things for everyone to remember. So the link for the pre-order form has gone out. If you don't have that in your email box yet and you are a friend of Ronaldo Gardens, email me. I will get you the link. If you have just joined, there is a little bit of a lag time, so bear with us there. But we'll take you at your word. Gardeners are generally honest people. But if you aren't a friend and you're viewing this, you can become a friend of Ronaldo Gardens at that website address down below. And we definitely encourage you to become one because without your help, the magic doesn't happen. One bit of housekeeping, all these pre-orders, you need to have it in by 8 p.m. on April 19th. That's next Tuesday. That's going to give us enough time to process all these orders and get them pulled so they'll be ready to be picked up by Friday. And you can either place your order for everything, pick it all up on Friday and be on your merry way and plant the weekend, or you can just book the key things that you want and then continue shopping on Saturday. Whatever works best for you. Another quick reminder, the plant sale, as it has been happening in the last few times, it will be on the front lawn of Ronaldo House. It's no longer down by the greenhouse. So if you come in the front gate of Ronaldo House, come down that drive, you will see it on your right by the house. And the sale will run from 8 to 2 on next Saturday, April 23rd. So with that being said, let's dive into some plants. I'll do my best to give you some good ideas about some of these plants. It's obviously not all inclusive because that talk would go on for hours. And not that I can't talk about plants for hours, but I think you'll get sick of it after a while. So these are just some things that stood out to me as fun plants, ones that you might want to definitely check out. The first one is an ornamental onion. This is Allium serendipity. And what this is, it's a sport or a mutation off of another allium called Millennium. And Millennium was the 2018 Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year. And trust me, if a plant has been designated that by the PPA, it's a good plant. And Millennium was a phenomenal plant. Late summer, you get this, wonderful kind of onion-like foliage. And then kind of mid to late summer, it starts setting up its flowerscapes. And someone described this as magenta. I will always give the disclaimer, I'm not the best at describing colors beyond the primary colors. But, it's a pollinator magnet that, all the pollinators love these things. They do have kind of the onion fragrance to the leaves. We had a whole discussion about deer browse. I will never, ever say that a deer will not touch a plant because as soon as I do that, they'll go eat it. But back to this plant. So it's a sport off of Allium Millennium. What is great is it has all the great qualities of Millennium, but the foliage color changed. So the foliage actually is more of a kind of a glaucous blue color to it. So it's basically another foliage color of the same flower. Um, but just a great plant. We do try to mix in obviously some natives. This is of course our native butterfly weed. Um, if you go out and see these in the wild, you'll see different colors. You'll see oranges. You'll see some that are leaning towards red. You'll see some yellows. Obviously, when you grow seed, it could be any of those. So we're offering just the straight species, or we also are offering this selection called Hello Yellow. So if you really want the yellow variant of butterfly weed, you can get it. And both of these are phenomenal for pollinators. They love it. A lot of your caterpillars that they'll chew on these. They take in the kind of poisonous sap, and that helps as a defense mechanism. That's why your monarchs really like plants in this family. One other thing I noted earlier was basically with butterfly weed, make sure that's where you want it because they do not like being transplanted. And of course, full sun with this. On to Baptisias or the false indigos. These have just exploded in variety over the years, and we're just kind of offering two different ones every year. These are two of the newest ones, Burgundy Blast and Vanilla Cream. They're fantastic plants. They're tough as nails. Get them through that first year, get them established, and you almost have to actively work to kill them. Of course, they like full sun. They can go into kind of filtered sun. I wouldn't put them in shade, but you'll get these big spikes of flowers. I think they've even evaluated some of these as cut flowers. But we've got two really nice colors. This kind of burgundy-esque color, and then this kind of yellowish white for Vanilla Cream. But great plants. They've come a long way since when I first saw these being bred back in like early 2000s. This is one that Forrest, one of our horticulturalists, was really excited about, partially because he's a history buff, and Thomas Jefferson actually grew blackberry lily at Monticello. The straight species, the flower tends to be kind of a reddish orange with speckles to it. This, is a pure yellow form called Hello Yellow. It's got iris-like foliage. Actually, the taxonomists have changed the names. I'm kind of dragging my feet. The new name actually is Iris domestica, but we'll still call it Bellum canda or blackberry lily. And if you look at the fruit there on the right, you can see why it's called blackberry lily. And those stems actually, they do well as cut stems in a floral arrangement for dried. So some dual uses for these plants. This is another PPA plant of the year. It was in 2021, Calamintha. What's great about this plant is it'll pretty much hang around 1.5 to 2 feet and just flower its head off throughout the whole summer. And all these the flowers are tiny but in multitudes, so it's almost kind of an airy cloud-like appearance to it. And it'll pretty much keep going for the majority of the summer. If it does tend to slow down and looks a little ranky, just take your shears and cut it back a bit. It'll reflush and then start flowering again. But calamint, it's a great perennial. I think we have another selection that the flowers aren't pure white. They kind of lean towards a light blue almost. This is one plant that I was really excited. And, some of the plants we order, it's partially, ooh, I want that. And this was one of them. I actually, back many moons ago when I worked for Tony Avent, he had a dianthus in the border that just screamed at you. And it was a Dianthus barbatus called Heart Attack. And the flowers on it were more of a black red. And it was just a fantastic plant. I mean, it was a 55-mile-per-hour plant, as in you could be driving 55 miles per hour and spot it. Well, this is a mutation off of that, and it's all the same great qualities of Heart Attack. It's a perennial sweet william, but instead of being more of a black red, this is more of an orange red. So Dianthus Scarlet Fever. I think this is one that's going to end up in my garden. Epimediums, I love this genus. There's huge diversity in them, from deciduous plants to evergreen ones like this one, Spine Tingler, is evergreen, so those leaves will be up all through the winter. I always love perennials that still are evergreen during the winter. And then in spring, the new foliage kind of has that tannish bronze look to it against the green. And then the flowers, they'll range about quarter size, but there's tons of them. So it's this airy, kind of spray effect. And this one got its name Spine Tingler because if you look at those leaves, you see they're kind of toothed. And this actually came from a collection in China by plantsman Daryl Probst back in, I think, like 2008. And Daryl did a lot of work in China. He had a partner in China that would continue to collect. And he basically rewrote the genus because, like, this one is actually a yet to be described species. So it doesn't have a species name. They still have to figure it out. And a lot of work that came out of Daryl's plant hunting is like that. So many new epimediums. They do well in shade. They can do well in dry shade. They're not the happiest there. If you can give a little bit of moisture, they'll be even happier. But epimediums are fantastic, kind of woodland perennials. Fun name, one of the names is barrenwort. The other one is kind of more fun. It's called horny goatweed. Because they observed that the goats would eat these things and they would get a little frisky. I don't know if that translates to humans. If it does, don't let me know. But epimediums are just great plants. This is one that just, it takes you back. This is one that people have memories. Adrian always thinks of her grandmother when she looks at the pink bleeding heart. So we do have the pink bleeding heart. We also have the white flowered bleeding heart. Both plants for shade. They do tend to prefer it not to be too dry. If you can get soils around it that are nice and rich and organic, they'll actually send seedlings out, so you'll get more. And so we have the traditional bleeding heart. We also have some of the fern leaf bleeding hearts in the plant sale as well. Moving on, this is pineapple lily, and this one, I would love to test this next to one called Sparkling Burgundy, which was the first kind of like hit of pineapple lilies. It was one that originated from Tony Avon, but it also had, the new growth is this almost black purple. I don't know if that's how you describe that foliage on the left, but it emerges. It's got these, kind of linear leaves. And then as the summer goes on, they do fade to kind of the green on the right, but then midsummer, they'll send these flowering spikes up and they're coated with tons of flowers. And then at the top of the flower, the reason it's called pineapple lily, it kind of has that tuft of leaves like you would have on a pineapple. And interesting fact, these actually are fantastic cut flowers. They last a long time. They can drop a few seedlings, so you might get some that aren't as dark as the other ones. So, if that bothers you, you can, just cut them before they go to seed. Another little trick you can do is if you want to get that dark leaf again after it's done flowering, you can cut the plant back towards, about an inch from the ground, and it'll reflush new leaves. So that way you can get that dark coloring again for the last part of the season. Iris, I love the genus Iris. There's so many different cultivars, so many different species. You could almost have an iris blooming in your garden year round. And it always kind of appalls me that you have this huge selection to choose from, and we grow basically one Siberian iris, and that's Caesar's brother. That's that kind of purpley Siberian iris. What's great about this species is your German bearded irises, the foliage usually looks pretty horrible. Siberian iris has really nice, clean foliage. You can almost even get some fall color out of them. But these are two different color selections. And, I picked these because we want to add these when we redo the blue and yellow garden. I thought these would be good additions. You've got butter and sugar on the left. That's got, these kind of white standards on the top petals, and then kind of buttery yellow falls, which are the bottom petals. And then this one sky mirror that is kind of a Carolina blue. So maybe you Duke fans out there can pass on this one, but I know that I'll be celebrating that color. But just two new selections of Iris siberica. This is a native iris that actually comes from Mount Cuba. Mount Cuba is a phenomenal garden up in the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia region. And they've done tons of work on native plants. And this plant apparently has been kicking around the garden for some decades, but it only recently came into cultivation in terms of being released. And actually, a portion of the sales go back to fund the work that Mount Cuba does. But this is a Iris versicolor purple flame or blue flag. Pretty standard flower color, but what's really unique is that when it emerges from the ground, it's that dark, kind of smoky purple. It kind of bleeds into the new foliage, so that gets just a different dimension to a fantastic native iris. We've got a handful that we'll be planting out on the estate as well. This is a plant that we offered last spring and we'll offer next spring and the spring after that, because I think it's just a great plant and every woodland garden would benefit from it. So this is good for, part shade to, I wouldn't put it in full sun, but part sun. But woodland phlox, it's a fantastic plant. The two selections we're offering are Blue Moon, which is kind of that purpley blue, and May Breeze, which is the white. One of the nice things about this is, again, kind of like I was talking about with the bleeding heart, if you've got really nice organic soils that are moist and not too dry, this will tend to drop seedlings all over the place. And what's great is you could get some variability. You could get different flower shapes, different flower colors. So that's kind of the fun. I love some of these perennials that'll reseed throughout your garden, and then you can just edit out the ones you don't like. But another benefit of woodland phlox is it's fragrant. Back when I started at Plant Delights, maybe in 2000, the spring garden was insane because he had woodland phlox all over it, and it flowered 2 weeks before open house. Otherwise, Tony could have sold these things for $100 for a quart, and people would have bought them. But just a fantastic phlox. Another great one is Phlox stolonifera, Sherwood Purple. This is a little bit lower growing, but spreads just as much, even a little bit more so than the Phlox divericata. Not as much fragrance as I can think of on this one, but then again, sometimes definitely with my knees and my back, trying to get down to smell a flower that's 2 inches off the ground is that's a dedicated task right there, because I've got to figure out how to get back up. This is a plant that I was left scratching my head. We had it in the fall plant sale and we didn't sell a lot of it. I'm not giving up hope. It's a sedge called Rhignospora colorata, or just call it white top sedge or star rush. It's a fantastic plant for wet soils to average soils. You can put it in part shade to full sun. And what's fantastic is that, it will spread. So be mindful of that. But then midsummer, it starts sending up these flowering spikes. And the flowers, you can tell, are in the center, but they're subtended by these white bracts that just really stand out. And one of the things I want to try, I haven't done this yet. I just, it's one of those things that you always have ideas, but you trying to find time to do them. I think these would be fantastic as a cut flower. Incorporate those into some arrangements. Another phlox that we've got, we offered Mini Pearl, I think, one of our last plant sales. And Mini is a fantastic plant. It's a great phlox. It's, powdery mildew resistant, really clean foliage, fragrant. It's pure white, tops out about 2.5 feet tall. If you cut it back after it flowers, you should get some reflowering in later fall. Well, this is either a sport or a seedling off of Mini Pearl that had this kind of pale pink to lavender color to it. But all the other great genetics about it, clean foliage, fragrance, reflowering. So Amethyst Pearl is definitely one I'd recommend. This is another one. I grew a different cultivar of Carolina phlox, one called Bill Baker, but kind of like the Mini Pearl and Amethyst Pearl, really clean foliage. This one will top out at more like 1.5 feet, so not as tall. But nice pink flowers, just a great plant. It's a good native plant. I can't testify to its reblooming, but I don't know. Let me know. And we're both trying to compare notes at in the fall. but this is Phlox carolina, subspecies Carolina Kim. Moving on to some annuals and tender perennials. So as I said during the talk earlier, coleus, if we don't have one you like, I don't know if we can please you, because we've got a lot of different coleus in the plant sale, and I've kind of been a little baffled at all the patenting that's happened on coleus. I mean, to patent a plant that if a branch breaks, by the time it hits the ground, it's got roots on it. You know, it's kind of like, come on now. But these are, I found a nursery that specializes in coleus, and they had a whole category of unpatented varieties. And there were a number of ones that always, you know, I remember when the sun coleus were really becoming a hit, and you know, some great ones that I had seen, and some others that's kind of struck my fancy. You know, this one on the bottom, fishnet stockings. I've always liked this variety. I've seen it used in containers where either they'll play off the purple veins and have another purple plant in the container, or they'll play off that kind of chartreusey lime color and have something playing off that color. But it's just it's a great coleus. This one, Morning After, is really interesting to look at. It kind of reminds me of sweet potato foliage, but it's you know, bright yellow with this kind of purple red border around the leaves. Another one, this Yellow Dragon, which has kind of got this really deeply lobed leaf, really interesting foliage texture. And then Shiny Shoes, which the photo doesn't capture it quite as good as it does in person, but it does. It looks like it's been shined. And this actually was a seedling that originated from Biltmore. But it's a really unique looking coleus. And then two unique forms. These are two trailing types, meaning like if you plant them in a container, they aren't going to go up like most coleus do. They'll kind of tend to spill over. So there's this one trailing salamander, and then this other one that I joked that, you know, a marketing team must have worked hours for this name, Trailing Red. You know, it's not the sexiest names, but it's a great plant. Angel's trumpets have a buddy that he was telling me at one point he went through his angel trumpet phase and had like 67 different types. I don't know if I'll get that eccentric about them, but I do love Brugmansia. And it's kind of fun playing around with different varieties, because some are hardy for us and some aren't. This one I like just because of the subtle variegation that you'll see on it. You know, it definitely doesn't scream at you, but really nice kind of I guess you'd describe it as hose and hose flowers, kind of that peachy orange, and of course fragrant. But this is one I picked up from a nursery down in Louisiana that we've been able to propagate. And we'll definitely look at adding some more in the future. This is another one that I was a little baffled that no one really gravitated towards last year. But this is Caribbean copper plant, or Euphorbia catinifolia. Catinifolia meaning leaves like catinus or smoke tree, which I think most of us are familiar with. It has this fantastic foliage all summer long, that kind of reddish purple. Again, horrible about color descriptions, but it does fantastic. The plant you see on the right was probably 2 years old, and these are easy to dig up. Even if you had them in a container, you can bring them indoors. Sometimes they will drop all their leaves and they'll just be a pile of sticks for most of the winter. And then come spring, give it a little bit of water. You know, they don't want to be wet. Definitely do not want to be wet, but they'll start leafing back out. I have two in our basement that are in trash bags, and they've been in there for all winter. But this is just a great foliage statement plant. And, you know, if you get it through a year or two and you can train it up as a tree, they really make a bold statement. This is another plant that I think we wanted to offer it before, but we just didn't have them ready. This is pink Savannah grass. We've used this in some of the displays. Honestly, if it didn't flower, I'd still grow it, because it's a grass. So it's got that, you know, real nice fine texture, but it's almost like a powdered blue color to it. So real nice color to play off of in the garden. But then come midsummer, it starts sending up these flowering spikes that are, these wonderful pink plumes. It's a great, it's annual. I've seen it come back in some, really protected areas. Definitely good draining soils. Will not be happy if it's wet. But pink savanna grass, I'm happy to be able to offer this one this year. This is another one that I'm glad that we got them. They came, they were sown at the right time, so they look good. So hopefully they'll sell. But this is a purple leaf, or I don't know if you call that purple or burgundy, form of rice. So, if you've got wet soils, it'll do fine in that. If you've got average garden soils, it'll do fine in that. If you look over on the left, you can see it, through most of the growing season, it's just these spikes coming up. It almost reminds you of phormium. But then come about September, it'll start sending up flowering spikes. And I really love the bicolor effect you get from this, because the flowers almost have a chartreusey green tone to them. So they kind of pop. But I love this purple leaf rice. It is something that, if you have one plant, you can save the seed and sow it again the next year and have more, or you can just, buy it from us again next year. But this is definitely an annual. I don't ever want us to lose. I want to always have stock of it. Whether or not we sell it every year is a different thing. This is another fantastic, this came out from, this was the gentleman called Greg Grant down in Texas. There's so many great plants that he has found, and this is one of them. It's a pentas, or starflower, but it's a variegated form of it. And honestly, even if it wasn't flowering, it's great looking. It's I wouldn't call that white. It's almost like a very pale chartreuse and green. But then you get these brilliant red flowers on it that the hummingbirds absolutely go bonkers over. The butterflies go bonkers over it. Just a great, multifaceted annual. This is a tender salvia. I always grew Chiapas sage, the straight species, and there's a nursery that's a salvia nursery, and they had offered this plant, and they said, normally that species doesn't give any seedlings for them, but then one year they got a few seedlings, and one of them, the leaves were twice as big, the plant got twice as big, everything was bigger. So they don't know if it, had some extramarital hanky-panky and, crossed with something else, but it's just another great tender salvia, so it's not going to come through the winters. So just be mindful of that, but just enjoy it for the season. This is one, again, kind of like that pentas, where you don't necessarily need the flowers, but this is variegated scarlet sage, dancing flames, and the leaves are that screaming yellow and green. And then as summer comes along, most of us grow the scarlet sage, the ones that they've taken the species and shrunk them down to like a 6 inches tall, which I think is a travesty. But this one will top out at more like 3 feet and then get these, just brilliant cardinal red flowers. Again, hummingbirds are going to go for that, but bees love it too. But this is dancing flame sage. Mexican bush sage. These tend to be perennial for us. Some less so than others, but greenwood is one that I got from a gentleman named Sam Barr up at the University of Maryland, and his comes back every year. The trick is make sure they are in well-drained soils. Wet soils will kill them, especially at winter. But and then white mischief came out of a breeding program in South Africa, kind of like 2008-ish. They also had Daniel's Dream, which had the white and pink. But this white one is another, great salvia. I think this one, I know some people, I think Jimmy Spees has had that come through the winter, but they're great. They're end of season salvias, so they're not going to do much until right towards the end of the season, then just explode. So it's a nice kind of exclamation point on the season. And another nice thing about these is they make great dried flowers. So, the flowers will fall off, but the calyces, which would be purple on the right or white on the left, they kind of hold on to that color for a long time. So another aspect of this plant that's great. Porterweed, I wrote about these in one of the Cultivate magazines. I've just kind of gotten enamored with them. There's new cultivars coming out that I keep trying to track down. Um, they're related to verbenas. I kind of describe them as if you took a verbena and just grabbed it by the center and pulled it straight up. That's what you get. And what's neat is kind of the flowers will continue to move up the spike. And it's almost like a daily, I described it kind of like shark teeth, where they just keep getting replaced. And the butterflies and hummingbirds love these plants. I don't know what the nectar count is or the sugar count is, but they just go for it. And there's, they range in color, like that Cayennensis is really, really a pale blue. Franzii or Franzii, that's a dark purple. Lavender's kind of in between, but bigger flowers. Nectar wand red is a nice red. I think we have 2 or 3 other ones in the plant sale, but they're great annuals for your pollinators. A few different vines. We do have, many of you have probably grown hyacinth bean, which has the purple flowers and purple pods. We are offering that one. We're also offering this one called Silver Moon that has white pods and white flowers. You could get one of each and have kind of a mixed color, bag. But those are really nice. Of course, it wouldn't be a plant sale without Moonvine. I mean, these things are fantastic. They're fun to show kids, like as they're really starting to develop, I always feel like they look like vanilla soft serve ice cream in a cone. And then if you're patient enough, and if you get a kid just to wait and watch, you can actually watch them open up, which is fantastic. And they have fantastic fragrance. It's really fun to watch the hawk moths come out at night because they've got this long proboscis, that's like a few inches long, and they just go bonkers over these things. So it's a great plant to kind of get kids' imagination of get them, let's get them excited about plants. Another one I joked, definitely not a botanical name that rolls off the tongue. So Mexican flame vine, bright kind of daisy orange flowers. I think Hayden actually used this almost as ground cover, and I thought that was a pretty brilliant idea to try that instead of taking it up on a trellis. And it just kind of scrambled through things, and you had these orange flowers popping up hither and yon. But great tropical vine. A few succulents and houseplants, because Lord knows that's the craze. This is an agave. This isn't as stiff as some of the other ones, but this is one called Joe Howe. And this one makes lots of babies. So you can start with one of the ones that we're selling, and in a year or two, you can have a pretty decent sized plant and then start pulling the babies off of it and sharing it. But these would be great if you've got some containers that at the end of the driveway that you don't want to haul a hose to. I have some of these in our house that I don't think I've watered since last fall. They're fine. They're tough as nails, and they don't mind water. They just don't like wet soil. So that, just make sure if you've got them that they've got good draining soils. But just great architecturally in the garden, and especially when you add the variegation to it, they stand out even more. Then jumping on a craze that's happening right now. So agaves on their own are cool enough plants. Well, we found out that they're related to, if you've ever grown tuberose or polyanthes, they're also related to a native plant called Manfreda that we call deciduous agave, because they actually go completely dormant, lose their leaves. They're actually, strangely enough, related to hostas. Well, we've got some adventurous plant breeders out there, and they were like, I wonder how closely related they are. So they started crossing Manfreda with agave. And what was interesting was, like, Manfredas will have spotting on their leaves, and it's kind of like it translated that into the agaves, and then the leaves didn't become as rigid. They were more succulent feeling. So not as unuser friendly. Some of them have spine, some of them have serrated edges, some of them don't. But just amazing architecturally, especially as container plants. And you've got variations like this red wing sitting against that ajuga. Then Aztec King, which has kind of that purple and bluish silver textures to it. And then two others, silver fox. I love the texture on that one. I mean, that's just, it doesn't need anything planted with it. It's a statement in itself. And snow leopard, this one, I mean, it's just stunning, especially as the temperatures get a little cooler, that white will almost get a pinkish tone to it. But they're just really, really cool plants. It's kind of fun when you have plant breeders that have imagination instead of just making things smaller. Then moving on to woodies, and this is kind of my influence of trying to bring some things that are, cool plants that I've grown, and I want to share them because I want people to get as excited about them as I am. This is one of them called Mexican mock orange or choisia. They're actually, some of them are native to like Arizona, New Mexico, down into Mexico, and they're citrus. They're relatives of citrus, and the leaves, if you crush them, they have kind of a citrusy smell to them. We had talked about this earlier. A lot of plants that have a strong aroma to the leaves, deer don't prefer. I will not say they won't eat them because they will eat anything, but they're less likely to. They might nibble on this and go, "Nah, I'm going to find something else." But in early spring, they get these white flowers that smell like orange blossoms. The one on the right, Aztec Pearl, we had this in our last garden, and the plant was about 5 feet tall by about 5 feet wide, and it's got these narrow green leaves, so really nice, fine textured foliage. The one on the left, Sundance, in early spring when it leaves out, it's that brilliant, brilliant yellow. It will fade to my kind of a chartreusey green. These can be in sun to part shade. They do fantastic. But we've got a handful of each of these that we've got in the plant sale. Edgeworthia, I can't understand gardening without one of these. They're just fantastic. They're related to Daphnes, except they tend to live. Daphnes kind of have that tendency, the minute you appreciate them, they'll die. Edgeworthias go on for years and years and years. They have this naturally rounded habit, the way they grow. What's nice is in midwinter, when the flower buds are there, they're covered with silver hairs, so they look like little silver flowers hanging off the plant. And then come, February-ish into early March, they open up and the fragrances just will fill your garden. So Edgeworthia, it's also a fun plant to show a child. You can actually take the branches. They're so flexible. You can tie them in a knot. And I think there's some tradition about, if you love someone, you kind of say a wish and tie the branch in the knot. Don't do it on the plants here, please. But we're happy to offer some of these in the plant sale. Another thing that we've got is a handful of different hydrangeas, not a lot of each, just a smattering. We do have some of your standard hydrangea macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea, some that are very similar to Endless Summer, which when Endless Summer came out, oh, wow, this thing blooms on new wood. And it was kind of started some research and people were like, I wonder if this trait is anywhere else. And there's a handful of other ones that were out there. Oak Hill, which we will have, All Summer Beauty, which we will have. We have one or two others, I think, that are reblooming, or the phrase they use for these are remontant, but just almost identical to Endless Summer, except they don't come in a baby blue pot. But then we also are offering different species of hydrangea. This is often called the mountain hydrangea, Hydrangea serrata. And what's wonderful about this species, it's smaller in scale in every way. The flowers are smaller, the leaves are smaller. Sometimes they're much more delicate, like this one, Pretty Maiden, where you've got these double flowers. And what I love about them is, you can appreciate a mophead hydrangea from afar, but these you kind of want to go up and inspect and kind of, it's that detail. So we've got Pretty Maiden, this nice little lace cap called Akagaku. Then this one, Yuki Tamari, which is a mophead, kind of just like its bigger cousin, like Endless Summer. Its flower color will vary on what your soils are, but it is smaller in stature. But the thing that's nice about this whole species is the fact that when we'll have a really cold winter or a late freeze that burns most of your hydrangeas and you lose those flower buds, the mountain hydrangeas really don't seem to have a problem with it. They'll sail through it and they'll flower no problem. It's a species, I don't know why we haven't been breeding them more often. In Japan, there's hundreds of selections. I'm on a quest to get as many as I can because I just absolutely love them. This is another plant. Look for us offering more pomegranates because they are hardy here. It kind of depends on which varieties, but I think Adrian and I had 8 different types of pomegranates at our last house. This one is a dwarf pomegranate, so it's only going to get about 4 feet high, but it's smaller in stature. The flowers are smaller, the fruit is smaller. People have always asked me, "Oh, is it edible?" And I'm kind of like, yeah, but if you've got a choice between a quarter-sized fruit and a softball-sized fruit, which one are you going to spend time on? But one thing that's nice about this selection, your typical pomegranates, they'll do their flowering and then immediately go to fruiting. This one tends to reflower all summer long. Loves hot baking heat, well-drained soils, but dwarf pomegranate, we've got about maybe a dozen of these in the plant sale, but just a great plant, full sun. And then Pittosporum. Way back when I was at the Ralston, one of the things we did, we started a statewide plant evaluation network. We had 13 sites across the state, from the furthest point west to down near Wilmington. And we picked a plant group that it's kind of like, okay, out on the coast, we grow Pittosporum tobira, that species. And, it's kind of like, okay, so we're basically growing 1 or 2 species of Pittosporum. There's like 80 to 100 different species of Pittosporum. What are the chances that just by luck we are growing the best one? So we tried all these really different ones. This one I think was actually hardy in Asheville. It's a fantastic evergreen, really fine texture. Those flowers are fragrant. It took me a couple years to like this plant again because, trust me, driving to 13 sites across the state with a van packed with flowering Pittosporum, it was almost nauseating, the sweetness in the car. But the only drawback to this plant is, and I will go ahead and say it, it's deer candy. So if you have a high deer presence in your area, don't get this one. We had one plant site that we planted I think 100 or so plants out, came back for the first round of evaluations. There wasn't a single one left. They had chewed them to the ground. But even though we've got deer in our area, I'm going to put it up close to the house because I love the texture on it. I love the fragrance. It's just a really cool plant. And then wrapping things up, we do have a handful of different herbs. We've got dill, fennel, parsley, lemongrass, this lavender that we're offering. I think last year we offered Phenomenal, which is aptly named. Well, this one comes from the same breeder. I want to say it's like a triploid version of Phenomenal. So it's kind of Phenomenal on steroids, but a really good grower for the lavender. So it'll be a good one for our area. A handful of different basils, from either the variegated African basil, Lesbos, or columnar basil. What's nice about that one is it tends to not flower, so you don't have to worry about cutting flowers off of it. I don't know, I haven't grown Everleaf Tower, but it's basically a sweet basil, but with a more upright growing habit. We do have sweet basil, lemon basil, Thai basil, some of the purple basils, so a handful of different ones there. 4 different types of eggplant. I'll go ahead and say, not the biggest fan of eggplant, so I'm not going to be going for any of these, I don't think. Peppers, got some great different peppers. I asked Michelle, where's the lunchbox? Because she said those were always her favorites, and they're completely sold out this year. And then a number of different tomatoes. Of course, Cherokee Purple is always a favorite. Black Frutula, a number of these we've carried year after year, but some new ones in the mix. Of course, Sun Gold just produces and produces and produces. I don't think we've got Super Sweet 100. That might be a mistake being in there, but obviously a lot of different tomatoes that we've got to offer. So wrapping it up, I do want to remind everyone that proceeds from the plant sale, they don't go to big corporate office or anything like that. They go to fund your favorite garden. So they help us do the magic that we do. And we greatly appreciate it. Again, if you're a friend of Renolda Gardens, you should have received your pre-order by now. If you have not gotten that email me, John, Jon, at renolda.org, and I'll quickly check and find out what's going on and get you an order form. But if you're not a friend of Renolda Gardens, you still can join and get that order form. Just go to this website right here. You can join online. It may take a day or two for it to get to us, which is why we ask that basically the cutoff is going to be, I want to say by the 18th. That'll give us enough time to get the orders in and get you an order form before the sale closes. But that being said, hopefully this makes up for our technical glitches. Again, thank you, Zoom, for doing an update that wiped out our settings. Hope this helps guide some of your plant purchases, but like I said, there's tons of plants in the plant sale. We're really excited about it. The weather looks like it's going to be great. So definitely, if you've got any questions, feel free to email us, and we'll do our best to answer them. And I know we've already got probably about 20 orders have come in so far. So get a hop in, but I will go ahead and get this posted and get this link shared out with everyone. And thanks again for everyone's patience. And I appreciate all your support for the gardens. Thank you.